Hi, and welcome to Southern Crescent Technical College Library's Life Hack series. Today we're going to go over citations, the very basics of what they are, why we cite, and most importantly, how to cite something properly. We're going to keep it brief, and at the end we're going to go over some resources that you can use to do your own citations when the time comes to it. Let's start off by talking about what a citation is. So in this case, we are not talking about traffic violation. This is a word that's going to come up whenever you are writing a research paper. A citation is a way for you to label parts of your research that don't come from yourself, that you got from other sources. So for example, if any of you use Wikipedia, you've probably seen this little label here for citation needed on statements like this where you want to know where the person got their facts from. There are two rules of thumb that you can keep in mind that can be helpful when you're trying to figure out what in your paper you need to cite and what you don't need to cite. First one is pretty cut and dry, and that's quotations. So if you directly quote the words of a book or a video or an interview that you saw, you're always going to cite that in your paper. So to give you an example of what that'll look like, in this paper here, this person has directly quoted this sentence, and so they've marked it in the paper in quotations at the end of the sentence here, the last name of the author and the page number it came from. The second guideline is a little less clear and it leaves more up to your judgment, and that's paraphrased ideas. So say you learned about a new theory or an idea from a book that you read and you want to use it in your paper. It's not your idea, so you need to let your audience know where you got it from. And that is going to look a little bit like this. So even though you don't see any quotation marks here, this person got this statistic from this author, and so you have to label it as such. So far we've been talking about in-text citations, or the parts of the paper itself where you stop to let readers know who your sources are. But there's a second part to the citation process as well, and that is the bibliography, or you might also hear it known as the works cited page. That's just a fancy word for a formatted list. This formatted part is very important. We'll talk about that a little more later. Of all the resources you used in your research. And it usually comes at the very end of your paper. And you'll just tally up everything that you used in the research process that you've cited in the in-text citations. So I just mentioned how formatting is an important part of bibliographies. All that means is that before you write your bibliography, you are going to choose to use one of these styles. Each style just has a different set of rules for how your bibliography is going to look on the page. Fortunately, you do not have to memorize all the rules for every different style. There are tons of guides out there, whether online or in print, you can look up to help you work through that process. So that's all very handy, and we're going to go over how to find that last. But before we do that, I want to talk about this important question, which is why citing is important. It seems like a lot of work for not really that much payoff. But there are three main reasons you want to keep in mind for why citations are so important and why it's worth the time to do it right. So the first and maybe most obvious reason to cite your sources is to avoid plagiarism. What this boils down to is just passing off someone's work as your own. And this can happen not only if you don't include citations, but also if you do them incorrectly. So glancing at the Southern Crescent Student Handbook, you're going to see that plagiarism falls under the umbrella of cheating here. If you're caught plagiarizing, you could get a lowered grade in the class. You could even get an F on your final grade in the course. So it's worth knowing how to do your citations properly to avoid this. Beyond just covering your own tracks with plagiarism, writing a works cited page can also help the people who are reading your paper too. So, for example, let's say that I've found this article about Kanye West, and I'm really curious as I read through it to learn more. I can just skip all the way to the bottom, down to the works cited page, and look at all these other works that the author referenced in the paper. And this just gives a great jumping off point for me to research more on the subject. One final thing a works cited page can do for you is to give you credibility in the eyes of your readers. If they see a works cited page at the end of your article, they know that you've done your research and that you know your subject. It just gives you more authority on your area in general. So now that we've talked for a bit about why citations are important, let's get into the mechanics of how they work and what they're going to look like on the page. Here's a hint. It's not going to look like this. As we mentioned before, there are a very specific set of rules that go into making a bibliography. And if you want to know what the finished product is going to look like, it's going to be a little bit like this. You're going to start off with works cited here at the top. Everything is going to be ordered alphabetically, as you can see. And depending on whether you're citing a interview or a book or a website, the rules are going to be different for how you organize the citations themselves. I'm not going to go into the details of what those rules are. Instead, I wanted to show you these two resources that can really help you as you go to write your works cited page. The first one is more of a guide for both MLA and APA. Second one is a citation generation website that does a lot of the work for you. I'm going to go more in depth in how these two work in the next video. If you want more information or to explore these sources on your own, you can check out our LibGuide citation page at libguides.sctech.edu/citations. The LibGuide will go more in depth with MLA and APA style and give you some more resources to learn about doing citations.